Carl Jung discovered something about empaths that will fundamentally change why you're still waiting. If you're someone who feels everything deeply, who can sense what others need before they speak it, and you found yourself waiting for someone to finally see you, to choose you, to recognize the depth of what you're offering, Jung found that your waiting isn't patience. It's a psychological pattern he called the empath's invisible prison, where your greatest gift becomes the very thing that keeps you trapped in relationships that will never give you what you deserve. This isn't about being too sensitive or loving too hard. This is about a specific configuration of consciousness that Jung spent decades studying, a rare form of perception that makes empaths experience love in ways that fundamentally differ from how most humans relate. When an empath waits for someone to choose them, something happens at the soul level that Jung called suspended becoming, where your entire life goes on hold while you orbit around someone else's inability to meet you. You've probably told yourself you're just being patient, that love takes time, that if you just understand them better, give them more space, prove your worth a little longer, eventually they'll see what you've been showing them all along. You've convinced yourself that waiting is noble, that it demonstrates the depth of your commitment, that real love means staying even when you're not being chosen. But Jung knew something most therapists won't tell you. Your waiting isn't love. It's fear disguised as devotion. It's self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. It's the part of you that learned long ago that your worthiness must be earned through endless patience, perfect understanding, and the willingness to accept whatever crumbs someone offers while calling it a feast. The person you're waiting for isn't confused about their feelings. They're not scared of how much they love you. They're not processing trauma that prevents them from choosing you. Jung would tell you the brutal truth that your empathic heart doesn't want to hear. They're showing you exactly who they are and what you mean to them through their consistent inability to choose you. And your empathic gift of seeing people's potential has become a curse that keeps you waiting for a version of them that doesn't exist. You feel their loneliness, their fear of intimacy, their unhealed wounds, and your empathic system translates this into evidence that they need you, that you're special to them, that eventually your understanding will be the thing that heals them into availability. But here's what Jung discovered. While you're waiting for them to choose you, you're unconsciously choosing to abandon yourself. If you've been waiting for someone to choose you, and something in these words is cutting through the stories you've been telling yourself, write in the comments how long you've been waiting. Sometimes naming the truth out loud is the first step toward setting yourself free. Jung made a discovery about empaths and waiting that completely contradicts what spiritual teachers tell you about patience and divine timing. He found that empaths who wait for unavailable people aren't practicing healthy patience. They're enacting what he called compulsive hope, a psychological defense mechanism where your empathic ability to sense possibility becomes weaponized against your own well-being. Your empathic system is designed to perceive potential in others. It's what makes you an extraordinary friend, an intuitive partner, someone who can see the light in people even when they can't see it themselves. This gift serves you beautifully in many contexts, but when you direct it toward someone who consistently doesn't choose you, it becomes the mechanism of your own captivity. You can feel the moments when they think about you. You sense when they're struggling, when they're lonely, when they're questioning their choices. Your empathic radar picks up every micro-expression of interest, every ambiguous text message, every moment of softness in their eyes, and your pattern-seeking brain weaves these fragments into evidence that they're on the verge of choosing you. Just a little more time, just a little more understanding, just a little more proof of your unwavering presence. Jung observed that this waiting creates what he termed temporal suspension, where your entire life becomes a holding pattern. You're not fully present in your current reality because you're living in an imagined future where they finally see you. You turn down opportunities, avoid other connections, keep your heart closed to people who are actually available, all because you're saving yourself for someone who isn't saving themselves for you. Think about what you've put on hold while waiting. The trips you didn't take because you wanted to be available if they finally reached out. The social invitations you declined because you were too emotionally exhausted from managing the anxiety of uncertainty. The potential partners you dismissed because they weren't them, because no one else made you feel what this person makes you feel, even though what they make you feel is mostly longing mixed with intermittent relief. Jung would ask you to consider what this waiting is protecting you from, because on the surface it looks like you're waiting for them. But underneath you might be waiting because choosing someone available, someone who sees you clearly and wants you consistently, terrifies you more than waiting forever for someone who doesn't. Available love requires you to be seen, It requires you to receive. It requires you to believe you're worthy without earning it through perfect patience and endless understanding. Waiting lets you stay in control. You can maintain the fantasy of who they might become. You can avoid the vulnerability of being fully chosen, which paradoxically feels more terrifying to many empaths than being perpetually almost chosen. Because if someone fully chooses you, you can't hide behind empathic service. You can't distract yourself from your own unworthiness by focusing on healing them. You have to show up as yourself and trust that yourself is enough. Jung documented case after case of empaths who waited years, sometimes decades, for unavailable people. And what he found was heartbreaking. The waiting wasn't just delaying their happiness. It was actively preventing the psychological growth that would make them capable of recognizing and receiving available love when it appeared. Carl Jung identified something that will explain why you keep choosing to wait instead of choosing to leave. He discovered that empaths who wait for unavailable people are unconsciously reenacting childhood patterns where love was conditional, intermittent, and required extraordinary effort to receive. Your waiting isn't about this person. It's about every time you waited as a child for a parent to notice you, to choose you, to give you the emotional presence you needed. You learned early that love doesn't come freely. It comes when you're good enough, patient enough, understanding enough. You learned to monitor the emotional temperature of your caregivers, to sense what they needed, to become whatever would make them more available. And when you encountered this person you're waiting for now, your unconscious mind recognized them instantly, not as your soulmate, but as your most familiar wound. They give you just enough attention to keep you hoping, but never enough to make you feel secure. They show you glimpses of the depth you crave, but disappear when you reach for more. They make you feel special in private, but won't claim you publicly. They tell you they care, but their actions consistently communicate that you're not their priority. And instead of recognizing this as the answer to your question about whether they'll choose you, your empathic system interprets it as a puzzle to solve, a code to crack, a person to heal into wholeness. Jung called this repetition compulsion. Your psyche brings you the same lesson in different forms until you finally learn what you need to learn. And for empaths, that lesson is devastating in its simplicity. You cannot wait someone into choosing you. You cannot understand someone into availability. You cannot love someone into recognizing your worth. All the empathic gifts that helped you survive childhood become weapons against yourself when you use them to excuse someone's consistent failure to choose you. The person you're waiting for isn't your person. They're your teacher. And the lesson they came to teach you is that you must stop waiting for others to choose you and start choosing yourself. Every day you wait is a day you're telling yourself that someone else's recognition matters more than your own, that their timeline is more important than your peace, that their potential is more valuable than your reality. Jung observed that empaths often experience waiting as a form of loyalty. You believe that leaving would be giving up, that walking away would mean you didn't love them enough, that your capacity to wait indefinitely is evidence of your depth. But Jung would tell you that staying isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. True loyalty would be to your own heart, to your own needs, to your own right to be chosen clearly and consistently by someone who doesn't need years to figure out whether you're worth choosing. Think about what you would tell your best friend if they described your situation to you. If they told you they've been waiting months or years for someone who sees them occasionally, who keeps them in emotional limbo, who won't commit but won't release them either, you would tell them to leave. You would tell them they deserve better. You would tell them that anyone who truly wanted them wouldn't make them wait like this. Yet somehow you've convinced yourself that your situation is different, that your understanding of this person's wounds makes the waiting justified, that your empathic perception of their hidden feelings means the relationship is more real than their observable behavior suggests. Jung made an observation that will fundamentally shift how you see this waiting. He discovered that the person empaths wait for isn't actually the person they think they're waiting for. You're waiting for the version of them you've constructed through your empathic projections, through the moments when they were present, through the potential you can sense in them. But that version exists primarily in your perception, not in their consistent reality. Your empathic gift allows you to see people's highest potential. You can sense who they could become if they healed their wounds, if they opened their hearts, if they chose growth over comfort. This is beautiful when you're supporting a friend through transformation or holding space for someone actively working on themselves. But when you're waiting for someone to choose you, this gift becomes dangerous because you fall in love with their potential while tolerating their reality. Jung called this anima and animus projection, where you project aspects of your own unexpressed self onto someone else, and then become attached to that projection rather than the actual person. The qualities you love most in them, the depth you sense they're capable of, the connection you feel is possible between you. These often reflect your own undeveloped capacities that you're meant to cultivate within yourself, not wait for someone else to embody for you. Think about the specific qualities that make you unable to walk away. Maybe it's their rare moments of vulnerability when they let you see beneath their walls. Maybe it's their intelligence, their creativity, their way of seeing the world that resonates with your own. Maybe it's the feeling that they understand you in ways no one else does, even though that understanding only appears occasionally and never translates into consistent choice. Jung would ask you to consider this. How much of what you love in them are actually qualities you possess but haven't fully owned? How much of the connection you feel is recognition of yourself reflected back through someone else's temporary presence? How much of your waiting is actually longing to integrate these qualities within yourself, instead of depending on someone else to provide them? The devastating truth about empathic waiting is that while you're suspended in hope, you're not developing the very qualities you're seeking in them. You're not building the emotional availability you wish they had. You're not creating the consistent presence you wish they offered. You're not choosing yourself the way you wish they would choose you. You're in a holding pattern, waiting for them to become someone they've shown you repeatedly they're not going to become. At least not for you. At least not now. If you're starting to recognize that you might be in love with someone's potential rather than their reality, share in the comments what quality you've been waiting for them to develop. Sometimes seeing it written out helps you realize you've been waiting for them to become what you need to become for yourself. Jung observed that the moment empaths stop waiting for unavailable people is often the moment they're forced to confront their own unavailability to themselves. Because if you're honest, truly honest, you've been unavailable to your own needs, your own desires, your own life while you've been waiting. You've made yourself emotionally homeless while trying to build a home in someone who has no room for you. Carl Jung discovered something about what happens to empaths who wait too long. He found that prolonged waiting creates what he called psychic atrophy, where your capacity to recognize and receive available love literally begins to deteriorate. Your empathic system becomes so calibrated to uncertainty, to intermittent reinforcement, to emotional scarcity, that consistent, available, committed love starts to feel wrong, boring, or somehow inauthentic. This is the trap that most empaths don't see coming. You tell yourself you're waiting because you love deeply, because you're loyal, because you can see who they really are beneath their fear. But what's actually happening is that your nervous system is being rewired to associate love with longing, connection with uncertainty, intimacy with anxiety. You're training yourself to only feel alive in relationships where you're not fully chosen. Jung observed this pattern in countless individuals who finally did get chosen by the person they'd been waiting for, only to discover they felt uncomfortable with the actual relationship. The chase was intoxicating. The waiting felt meaningful. The uncertainty kept them engaged. But when it finally became real and available, it lost its charge. They found themselves creating distance, picking fights, or unconsciously sabotaging what they'd been supposedly waiting for. This reveals the shadow truth about waiting. For many empaths, the waiting itself becomes the relationship. You're not actually waiting for them to choose you. You're addicted to the emotional intensity of almost being chosen. You're comfortable in the familiar territory of longing. You're safe in the role of the person who understands, who waits, who loves unconditionally, because that role lets you avoid the much scarier prospect of being in an actual relationship where you're seen, where you have to receive, where your own fears of intimacy would be exposed. Jung would challenge you to examine what you get from waiting. What does it allow you to avoid? What vulnerability does it protect you from? What does it let you feel about yourself? Many empaths waiting for unavailable people are unconsciously using the waiting to feel morally superior, to prove their capacity for deep love, to avoid facing their own fears of commitment and intimacy with someone who's actually available. The person you're waiting for might be unavailable, but you need to ask yourself honestly whether you're truly available either. Not just physically or logistically available, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually available for the kind of love you claim you want. Because Jung found that people who are genuinely ready for committed partnership don't wait indefinitely for unavailable people. They recognize unavailability quickly and move on to find someone who can meet them. If you're still waiting after months or years of inconsistency, Jung would suggest that some part of you is choosing the waiting because it serves a function in your psyche. Maybe it lets you maintain the fantasy of perfect love without facing the reality of imperfect human relationship. Maybe it allows you to focus all your energy on someone else so you don't have to do your own inner work. Maybe it gives you a reason why you're not in the relationship you say you want, so you don't have to confront your own ambivalence about partnership. This isn't about blaming yourself for someone else's unavailability. It's about recognizing that your response to their unavailability, the choice to wait rather than leave, reveals something important about your own relationship with love, with yourself, with what you actually believe you deserve, versus what you say you want. Jung made a discovery about the moment empaths stop waiting that will give you hope even if you can't imagine walking away right now. He found that there's a specific psychological shift that happens when you finally choose yourself over waiting. A transformation he called sovereign awakening, where your entire relationship with love fundamentally reorganizes itself. This shift doesn't happen through force or willpower. It happens through accumulation. Every time they don't choose you and you feel the pain fully instead of making excuses. Every time their actions contradict their words and you acknowledge the truth instead of clinging to hope. Every time you imagine your life continuing like this for another year, 5 years, 10 years, and feel the grief of what you're sacrificing. The truth accumulates until one day, it finally outweighs the fantasy. Jung called this the moment of psychological necessity. You don't leave because you've stopped loving them. You leave because something deeper than love finally speaks louder than your empathic hope. You leave because your soul recognizes that waiting is killing who you're meant to become. You leave because you finally understand that choosing them means uncharging yourself, and unchoosing yourself is a betrayal you can no longer justify. The empaths Jung studied who successfully stopped waiting all described a similar experience. It wasn't dramatic. There was no final fight, no ultimate betrayal, no moment where the person did something unforgivable. Instead, there was a quiet recognition, a simple but profound understanding that this is who they are, this is what they're offering, and it will never be enough. Not because they're bad people, but because this is their capacity, and your needs exceed their capacity, and no amount of waiting will change that fundamental incompatibility. When you finally stop waiting, Jung found, the grief is immense. You're not just grieving the person, you're grieving the future you imagined, the belief that your love could heal them, the fantasy that your patience would eventually be rewarded, the story you told yourself about being the one person who understood them well enough to make them want to change. You're grieving your own innocence, the part of you that still believed love conquers all if you just love hard enough. But underneath that grief, Jung discovered something extraordinary. There's relief, a bone-deep exhale, a softening in your nervous system that you didn't even realize was clenched. Because whether you consciously acknowledged it or not, waiting was exhausting. The constant monitoring for signs, the emotional management of uncertainty, the mental gymnastics of making their inconsistency make sense, the performance of being okay with less than you need, all of it required enormous energy that you're suddenly free to direct elsewhere. If you're recognizing that you're exhausted from waiting, that the hope you've been carrying is actually a weight that's crushing you, write in the comments just the word tired. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. Sometimes acknowledging the exhaustion is the first step toward rest. Jung observed that empaths who stop waiting go through a period he called the void, where you're no longer waiting for them, but you haven't yet discovered who you are without the waiting. You feel lost, purposeless, like a satellite that's lost its orbit. Your days feel empty without the constant mental occupation of analyzing their behavior, managing your hope, preparing for the next time you might see them or hear from them. Carl Jung discovered that the void empaths experience after stopping the wait isn't emptiness, it's spaciousness. It's the psychological room you need to finally meet yourself without the distortion of living in someone else's maybe. And in this space, Jung found, empaths undergo what he called identity reclamation, where they remember who they were before they learned to define themselves through someone else's choice. You start noticing small things first. Maybe you sleep through the night without waking up checking your phone. Maybe you make plans without that background calculation of whether you'll be available if they reach out. Maybe you hear a song that used to remind you of them and feel something softer than the usual longing, something closer to tenderness for your own heart that survived loving someone who couldn't love you back the way you needed. Jung called this the return to self, but it's not really a return. It's more like a discovery, because the self you're meeting now isn't the person you were before you started waiting. It's someone new, someone who's been forged in the fire of choosing yourself when everything in you wanted to keep choosing them. Someone who knows the difference between patience and self-abandonment, between understanding and excuse-making, between love and longing. The empaths Jung studied who fully integrated this transformation described a profound shift in how they experienced their empathic gifts. Before, their empathy made them vulnerable to people's potential, to their hidden feelings, to the gap between who they were and who they could become. After, their empathy became discerning. They could still feel deeply, still sense others' emotions, still recognize potential, but they no longer confuse those perceptions with commitment or availability. You develop what Jung termed boundaried compassion. You can witness someone's struggle without making it your responsibility. You can recognize their wounds without believing you're meant to heal them. You can appreciate their complexity without tolerating behavior that doesn't honor you. Your empathic heart remains open, but it's no longer unprotected. Jung observed that this transformation also changes what empaths are attracted to. The person who can't choose you starts to lose their magnetic pull. Their unavailability stops feeling like a challenge to overcome and starts feeling like information to respect. And simultaneously, you start noticing people you'd previously overlooked, people who show up consistently, people whose words match their actions, people who don't need years to figure out whether you're worth choosing. At first, available people might feel boring. Their consistency might feel too easy, their clarity too simple, their desire for you too uncomplicated. Jung understood this resistance. Your nervous system has been trained to associate love with uncertainty. Consistent presence doesn't trigger the same dopamine response as intermittent reinforcement. But if you push through this initial discomfort, if you allow yourself to experience what it feels like to be chosen clearly and consistently, your system begins to recalibrate. You discover that available love isn't boring. It's peaceful. And peace, Jung found, is what empaths need most after years of chaos disguised as connection. You discover that you don't need drama to feel alive, that uncertainty isn't synonymous with depth, that someone choosing you easily doesn't mean the love is shallow, it means they're actually available for love. Jung documented numerous cases of empaths who, after releasing their unavailable person, found themselves in relationships that astonished them with their ease. Not easy in the sense of requiring no effort or never facing challenges, but easy in the fundamental sense that both people want to be there. Both people choose each other. Both people show up. The relationship becomes enhancement rather than project, partnership rather than rescue mission, growth rather than waiting. Carl Jung's final insight about empaths who are waiting will transform how you see your entire experience. He discovered that the waiting was never really about the other person. It was about you learning to recognize that your empathic gift of seeing potential in others must first be directed inward before it can serve you in relationships. You've spent so much energy sensing what others need, recognizing what they're capable of, holding space for their becoming. But Jung would ask you, when was the last time you directed that same empathic recognition toward yourself? When did you last acknowledge your own potential? When did you last choose to see the person you're becoming instead of obsessing over the person they're not becoming? The person you were waiting for was a mirror, not a mirror of who you could love, but a mirror of how you've been treating yourself. Their inconsistency reflected your own inconsistent commitment to your well-being. Their inability to see your worth reflected the ways you've been unable to see your own worth. Their choice to keep you waiting reflected all the ways you've kept yourself waiting for permission to live fully, to love freely, to be happy without conditions being met first. Jung believed that every person who enters your life, especially those who cause you pain, comes as a teacher. They're not teaching you about them. They're teaching you about you. The person you couldn't stop waiting for taught you about your capacity to love, yes, but more importantly, they taught you about where you still need to learn to love yourself. Every moment you waited for them to choose you was a moment you weren't choosing yourself. But here's what gives me hope for you. What Jung discovered gives empaths like you extraordinary potential for transformation. Your capacity to feel deeply, to sense what's beneath the surface, to recognize potential. These aren't weaknesses, they're superpowers. The problem was never your empathy. The problem was that you were directing it everywhere, except inward. Imagine what becomes possible when you turn your empathic gifts toward yourself with the same dedication you brought to understanding someone who couldn't choose you. Imagine if you waited for yourself to heal with the patience you offered them. Imagine if you recognized your own potential with the clarity you recognized theirs. Imagine if you chose yourself with the consistency you wish they would choose you. You don't need to stop being an empath. You need to become an empath who knows that your gifts are sacred and should only be shared with people who can recognize them as such. You don't need to stop feeling deeply. You need to start feeling deeply about your own experience, your own needs, your own worthiness of being chosen without having to wait. The waiting is over not because they finally chose you, but because you finally chose yourself. And in that choice, you become someone entirely different. Someone who can love deeply without losing themselves. Someone who can stay open without being destroyed by what they feel. Someone who knows that their empathic heart is both their greatest gift and their greatest responsibility. And that responsibility begins with directing it toward their own healing first. If this journey through Jung's insights has shown you something about yourself, something about why you've been waiting, something about what you're ready to choose instead, I want to hear your voice. Share in the comments what you're choosing instead of waiting. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's just the courage to walk away. Your words might be exactly what another empath needs to hear to take their first step toward freedom. And if this exploration has helped you see your empathic nature not as a curse, but as a gift that's been misdirected, I'd be deeply honored if you'd subscribe to continue this journey into understanding the deeper psychology of loving as an empath. Share this with another empath who needs to know that waiting isn't love, and choosing yourself isn't selfish. Thank you for trusting me with this sacred time. Thank you for having the courage to look at the truth of your waiting instead of hiding behind hope. Thank you for being willing to choose yourself even when everything in you has been trained to choose others first. Your empathic heart isn't meant to wait in someone else's maybe. It's meant to thrive in your own yes. Until our paths cross again in the next exploration of what it means to be human and whole.